If you're tired of playing against Darkrai every game in ranked and want to just one-shot it away, Meowscarada is the deck for you. With its 2 energy attack, Meowscarada can always one-shot Darkrai and Weavile due to the type advantage, and combined with red can also one-shot Giratina, Arceus, Palkia, and more. In this in-depth guide, I'll go over my deck list, common combos, how I rate the matchups you'll face in ranked, and finally replays from my ranked games so you guys can pick up some more strategies and see how I play matchups. Without further ado, let's go! Alright, let's dig into this deck list. Starting off with Sprigatito. Sprigatito is a 60 HP grass type, basic, with a 1-cost attack, Cry for Help. This lets you put one random grass type Pokemon from your deck into your hand. This is going to help us find other basics and our evolutions for Sprigatito and our other grass type Pokemon. The most common choices are either the Executor line or the Beedrill line. I prefer Beedrill and I'll explain why later. This is also going to help you find basics for insurance in case you get one shot next turn, which is rare, but it can happen with Dawn plays or a fire deck. We're at 60 health, so we don't have to worry about stuff like Skarmory and Carnivine like Manaphy has to. The 1 KP run is also going to help us with one-shots. This card brings a ton of strategy to the deck. There's actually a lot of cases where instead of immediately evolving into the next stage, you actually want to keep Sprigatito online so you can search more often. That's going to secure a stronger late game, as you'll have guaranteed access to those cards. It's got a weakness to fire and a 1-cost retreat. It evolves into Florigato, a stage 1 with 90 HP. This has the 2-cost attack Slash, so for 40 damage, and it deals 60 damage to things that are weak to grass. That's going to include Rampardos, Cranidos, that line, Darkrai, Weavile, Sudowoodo, and many others. So 2 for 40 is solid damage, and you'll see Meowscarada has the same cost. This attack comes up really often. You can use the 40 piece plus the 60 from Meowscarada to 2-shot a Dredagon. And note that it does stay at the 1 cost for retreat, as does Meowscarada. This evolves into Meowscarada, our first star, 140 HP stage 2, not an EX, so you only lose 1 point for it dropping. It has the 2-cost attack Fighting Claws. This deals a base of 60 damage, but if the opponent's active Pokemon is an EX, then it deals 70 more for 130 total. This is the main draw of this deck. It's a 1 life point Pokemon that can deal 130 to EXs, and with Darkrai and Giratina dominating the meta, this 130 is enough to one-shot Darkrai and Weavile because of their 20 weakness to grass. It's enough to one-shot Giratina off the rip if they attack once with their own attack, because Giratina does 20 to itself, leaving it at the perfect 130. If they have Cape in those scenarios, you can just counter with red as well. Combined with red, you can one-shot Dialga, Arceus, Palkia, Articuno, Moltres, and so many other different EXs. This is a huge solving card in the meta. Grass types even have an advantage against Rampardos. And in tournament play, there's actually going to be an uptick in Darkrai Weavile players, because in the biggest tournament of the set so far, Giratina Mewtwo won, and people are going to play, and there's going to be more people playing Darkrai Weavile to counter that. This deck absolutely destroys Darkrai Weavile. That's because we use Sprigatito to search out 2 copies of Meowscarada, and once you have that backline insurance, you almost always have the threat to be able to one-shot both Darkrai and Weavile. But the one caveat is that it only deals 60 if they're not an EX, so this deck does struggle into the non-EX decks, which there are a few. The biggest example is going to be the Rampardos deck, but it's pretty uncommon in ranked. The most popular deck by far in ranked is Darkrai Giratina. Next up is the Beedrill line. Starting off with Weedle, this is the one from Genetic Apex. It has 50 HP and deals 20 damage for a 1-cost Sting. It has a 1 retreat and a weakness to fire. So 50 damage, you're vulnerable to a lot there if you open with Weedle, which does happen. But we run 1 Weedle and 2 Sprigatitos, so the chance to be stuck with Weedle is about 30%. A little lower, it's not 33% because you start with 5 cards in your hand. So it's not going to happen often, but it does come up. The good thing is that it still does 20 damage on 1 energy, and you're going to be playing against Darkrai pretty often. That goes up to 40, so not bad at all. Weedle at 50 HP can also still tank 2 hits from Darkrai from that chip damage, and that's the reason why Sprigatito is so good at 60 as well, is because you can tank 2 hits and then just Erica it up, and then if you're stuck on Weedle or Sprigatito, you're going to force them to use another chip plus the attack from Darkrai, which is going to stall them for another turn. Weedle evolves into Kakuna. This is a stage 1 with 80 HP. It has the 1 energy attack once again, 20 damage, but it is String Shot, and you flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So this is a 50-50 chance, but if you hit that heads, this is really, really crucial in games. What Paralyzed does is that they're not allowed to use their moves or retreat. They can cleanse this either through the Pokemon Center Lady or by evolving. Darkrai Giratina decks usually run 1 copy of the Center Lady, but that's a pretty low chance that they have that in their hand. So Kakuna can be crucial in buying you turns to find Beedrill to evolve into next turn if you flip that heads. If you don't, it's still 20 damage, going up to 40 against Dark on 1 energy at 80 HP. There's going to be a lot of games where you use this as a stall piece or a meat shield to tank for your Meowscarada next turn, or try to stun as a last-ditch effort to get into Beedrill. Note that Kakuna has a 2-cost retreat, unlike Weedle and Beedrill. Just take note of that, watch out for that. There may be a situation where you get Sabrina'd, and then if you have no energy on Kakuna, you're stuck on it next turn. Luckily enough, all of our Pokemon are pretty low energy, so usually you'll have enough energy to just swap it back in, but be careful about that. Finally, our second star is Beedrill EX, 170 HP stage 2. At 170 HP, it's never going to get one shot by Darkrai combo or Giratina. Even if they have a red, they only get up to 150. It can take the full Palkia Storm, Dialga, Arceus, all of that. It can even tank a Rampardos with one Lucario, although if they have two or red, then that's the whole 170. So that 170 mark is pretty strong. The 2-cost attack Crushing Spear deals 80 damage and discards a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. The 80 damage for 2 energy is solid. It's not amazing, it's not terrible, although it does deal 100 to the things that are weak to grass, which is pretty good. But another great part is the discarding a random energy and also just how tanky it is. The strength of this attack kind of depends on what deck they're playing. In most cases, it's just going to force them to use their next turn's energy on their currently active Pokemon to attack you back. If they reattach, that's going to prevent them from investing in higher energy costing attacks, for example, the new Charizard EX, or just another Pokemon in their bench in general. Where this can be really effective against is Pokemon that already discard their own energy. The most common example in this meta is going to be Gyarados EX, where after it attacks, it picks a random Pokemon on the board and then discards it. If they discard their own energy, which is pretty likely, it's usually around like a 30 to 50% chance depending on how late you are into the game. If they only have 4 energy and they discard their own, you can Beedrill attack next turn, and then suddenly they have to attach 2 turns in a row to be able to attack. They can attack next turn, which is usually going to be game ending for them. This is why I used to also pair it with Team Rocket Grunt, but I found that a Sabrina was more useful. But those 2 cards together can be super devastating if you like flipping those heads. A more obvious example is Yanmega EX, but nobody's really running that anymore. It also disrupts Dawn plays like with Mewtwo Giratina, because now they need 3 energy instead of 2, which they can't do with just Dawn. But the biggest part we're missing are the decks that only run 1 energy, but rely on an ability to generate a different type of energy. The 2 biggest examples of this are going to be Darkrai Giratina and Darkrai Magnezone. They only run Dark Energy, and how Giratina works is they have to end their turn without attacking to be able to generate an energy onto Giratina, and they need 3 Psychic Energy to be able to use Giratina's attack, plus 1 of any color, which is usually Dark. So if they're at a point where they only have 3 Psychic Energy and you attack them with Beedrill, if you hit the 3 out of 4 chance to take away 1 of their Psychic Energy, they cannot attack with Giratina again until they use the ability 1 more time, because of the 3 Psychic requirement. A similar thing happens to Magnezone, but also Magnezone discards its own electric energy. So if they only use 2 electric energy and swing with the Magnezone, they're going to discard 1 of their own and then attach next turn for the Dark for the 3 energy count, because you only need 1 electric and 2 colorless for that attack. It's a 50-50 chance if they only have 1 Dark and 1 electric. If you discard that electric, that Magnezone is dead in the water. They don't have a way to get electric energy back onto the Magnezone, so it can't use this attack ever again. That's why I prefer Beedrill over Exeggutor. It's also just a lot less boring for me, to be honest, and it's a very nice closer to play around after playing through 2 Meowscaradas. Next up are supporters, starting off with 2 Ericas. Erica is from Genetic Apex and lets you heal for the damage from one of your Grass-type Pokemon. This heal is huge in this meta. That's because you want to look closely at our HP bars. So Meowscarada has 140 HP. Giratina's one-shot range is 130 HP, so if Meowscarada gets chipped once by Darkrai, they're going to be at 120 HP, being in that range. Erica is going to get us back up to 140. It can heal away 2 instances of that Darkrai chip, because that deals 40. That's going to make Meowscarada be unable to be one-shot by the Giratina anymore. Cape is also going to help with that, preventing a chip plus Giratina attack in the same turn. But it's pretty often by the time they're actually able to attach a Dark Energy to Darkrai and attack with Giratina, it's pretty late into the game where you also have all your pieces out, and usually you'll be able to win out from there. Erica is also great for the early game. Again, it heals away 2 of those Darkrai chips on your Sprigatito or your Weedle. You can get more searches off, more stalling, until you get that Meowscarada out. It's also going to stop critical 2-shot points on Beedrill as well, so just a great card. Next up is Red. We also run 2 copies of this. During this turn, attacks used by your Pokemon deal 20 bonus damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to combo those with Meowscarada most of the time. This is going to bring that 130 damage up to 150, which is going to be enough to one-shot Darkrai with Cape, Weavile with Cape, Arceus, Dialga, Palkia, Moltres, Articuno, almost everything in the game. You can manage to hit a Gyarados with Florigato last turn for the 40, combine it with the 130 from Meowscarada plus 1 red, that's also going to reach that 180 mark. But most commonly, this is going to help you get around those Capes. We really do need to run 2 of these because of how common it is for us to play against a Cape on a Darkrai and a Giratina. Otherwise, we could consider 1 Giovanni to help out with the non-EX matchups, but those are so rare compared to the Darkrai and Giratina decks that this is the way to go. Next up, 2 research, should be 2 copies in every deck. Pot of Greed, broken. Our last supporter is 1 Sabrina, so I used to run 1 Team Rocket Grunt to combo with the Beedrill. However, Sabrina is just super useful, and is a bit more useful than Cyrus, I say, in this deck, because we have no backline access. Sabrina helps a lot with matchups where the active Pokemon is stalling or generating for something in the backline. So the biggest examples of that are going to be Druddigon, Manaphy, and Moltres. Sabrina gives you access to things that are hiding behind those Pokemon. It's going to force them to leaf out or use energy to retreat back in. Otherwise, they're open to being hit by Meowscarada. It also helps in the late game against the EX matchups where they barely survive with a little bit of health, and they only have so many Pokemon. Biggest example of this is going to be the Darkrai Giratina decks with Cape, and you don't have red. Sabrina is going to help you finish off. Another big example is Gyarados and Charizard, where they're a bit too tanky for you to one-shot. Sabrina is going to help you pull them back in and one-shot them for the game, as long as they don't have other Pokemon, which usually those decks only run a certain amount of basics, so it's pretty uncommon for them to have another Sabrina shield at that point in the game. Yes, Cyrus will be better for that purpose specifically, but the first use case with Sabrina is so good against those decks, which are actually very common in ranked. Also, you can just use it as a disruptor in the early game. If you don't think you'll use it later, make them waste an energy, a leaf, or a turn. Next up for items, 2 Pokeball is critical. We do only run 3 basics, and Sprigatito is going to search a lot of the grass. So the second Pokeball does end up dead in the late game usually, but this is going to help you with really bad draws. It's going to help you if you have no other basics, because you lose the game if your active drops and you have nothing on the bench. It also helps thin the pool to help you find the bigger evolutions, because you can't Pokemon communication into those basics anymore, and you can't Sprigatito cry for help into those basics anymore. So always use your Pokeballs first before researching and before using those items if you're looking for a higher evolution. Next up, 1 copy of Giant Cape. I think you should always run this. This is going to help you survive a bunch of matchups. It's another round of Darkrai chip, survives Giovanni on the Giratina matchup, helps a Sprigatito or Weedle survive Dawn plays. Super good card all around. I don't feel like you need Helmet in this deck, considering you have 2 reds already, and your goal is to pretty much one-shot everything, so the chip damage isn't really helpful, especially since a lot of the decks nowadays run healing. Finally, the last card I run is Pokemon Communication. 1 copy of that. It lets you choose a Pokemon in your hand and switch it with a random Pokemon in your deck. This provides us a bit of consistency. If you draw into a Beedrill and you feel like there's no way you're going to find Beedrill or Kakuna or play at this game and you want to just find Meowscarada instead, or vice versa, you open with Weedle and Kakuna, you really want Beedrill, this is going to help you get there a bit faster. There are definitely arguments to replace this with a Cyrus, which is going to help you late game, just gives you more tools to play from, but I feel like this helps a bit with consistency. This deck is already pretty consistent because you can stall with Sprigatito and draw so many different Pokemon, but you're also going to be sad when you get hit with the Mars or the red card, because this deck is really susceptible to that since we're drawing so much with Sprigatito. It's pretty common for you to be stuck with a bunch of supporters or grass-type Pokemon in your hand that you can't place down right now. So Pokecalm is going to help you alleviate some of that stress, but I can totally see an argument for replacing that with Cyrus or a Team Rocket Grunt. But that's the deck list. Let me go into a bit of the basic combos. Most commonly, you'll open with Sprigatito. If not, Weedle is only a 1-cost retreat. Start with Sprigatito and use its Cry for Help if you're going second. You'll see this in the replay section, but every game you're going to want to look at your hand and then look at their type and what deck they're playing. If they're playing a Darkrai Giratina without Druddigon, which is pretty common nowadays since they want to go for those Dawn plays, or Darkrai Weevil, Giratina, Mewtwo, stuff like that, then you can play for an aggressive evolution onto Sprigatito. Otherwise, if you think they're going to stall for a bit, then you can stall too by getting more Cry for Helps off onto your active Sprigatito and evolving things onto the bench. Eventually, you want to put in a Meowscarada with 2 energy to one-shot any EXs they have. Meowscarada only costs 1 life point because it's not an EX, so the best scenario for your deck is to run through 2 Meowscaradas and then end the game with a Beedrill EX. And that is going to be very strong against any EX deck. Use your Meowscarada, your Reds, your Sabrina to swing aggressively and end the game as fast as possible against those Darkrai decks. Our Pokemon are all very low energy costs in both their retreat and their attack, so we don't need to run X speed or Leaf. Pretty often in the end game, you'll have extra energy, which is actually good because you want that for retreating, or you might get Team Rocket Grunted, so you can stack your Pokemon with extra energy if they're your carry. Just watch out to not overstack against stuff like Gallade, because that has happened to me before. But yeah, let's get into your ranked matchups. Alright, so in your ranked games, the most common decks are going to be Giratina EX and Darkrai EX. That's going to be either with Druddigon or without Druddigon. Then Gyarados EX and Manaphy, and Weavile EX and Darkrai EX. Before Ultra Ball and especially Master, there's going to be a lot more variety, but once you get up there, those are the 3 most common decks by far, as well as this deck, Meowscarada Beedrill or Meowscarada Exeggutor. From my experience, also pretty common to run to Giratina Mewtwo, Gallade, Hitmonlee, Rampardos, and Lucario, and Charizard Moltres EX, the classic. You might run into a few Wugtrio, Palkias, and some Dialga Arceus players, as well as the Darkrai Magnezone, but those are a lot less common than the top 3 decks. So the most common matchup, I know it here is, this is the tournament win rate section, but in ranked, it's going to be Giratina Darkrai EX. With Druddigon, I feel like once you get to Master, there's going to be less Druddagons, but before that, there's going to be more Druddigon players. This deck fares a lot better against the ones without Druddigon, but it still does fine against the ones with it, especially once you run that Sabrina. Really, all that matters in this matchup is that you have 1 Meowscarada prepped in the back to one-shot Darkrai and Giratina with red in the late game. Use your Ericas to stall out some searches with Sprigatito against the Darkrai poke, And if they have Druddigon in their front line, you can combine 2 attacks from the first stage, and then the second stage Meowscarada. That's 40 damage from Florigato's attack, and then 60 from Meowscarada to finish off the 100. If they heal, just attack again. Use your Erica to heal back that chip damage. Make sure you're saving your resources correctly though, because if you heal and you're still going to be in one-shot range of Giratina or Darkrai, then there's really no point in using those heals. You should save it for later. Lethal ranges are going to be 130 from Giratina and 150 if they already have 4 energy on Giratina, because then they can attach with Darkrai. Your cape gets you above that range. For Darkrai, it's going to be a 20 without the attack, and then 100 with the Dark Energy attached plus the attack. I believe some Giratina and Darkrai players are running Giovanni now to deal with this Meowscarada deck. The cape is going to save you from that. They only ever run 1 copy though, and the cape is going to save you from that. But the idea is to sacrifice your Meowscarada for the first Druddigon or the first Darkrai, and then you already scored 1 or 2 points, so regardless of whether it was a Druddigon or not, you're going to be able to end the game with the 1-shot on the next Darkrai or the next Giratina. It can happen where they get lucky enough to have 2 Druddigons and send the other one in. Hopefully by then you draw into your Sabrina. Otherwise, you play for the late game and probably end the game with Beedrill. Pretty good at clearing the Druddigons as well, but you can get 1 shot with the Druddigon Reflect plus a Giratina plus Darkrai or Giratina plus Red, so watch out for that. Most of the time, you'll be clearing it with Meowscarada. And then without Druddigon, the matchup is super easy. If they have it, they're going to open with Darkrai pretty often to go for that Dawn play. If they do hit you with the Dawn, hopefully you found your other Sprigatito, and then you can start building that instead of the one you're active, which is what you should be doing if you see it's a Darkrai and Giratina with no Druddigon, because you should be thinking about that threat, right? A lot of them run 2 Dawns, and if they have that Dawn, they're going to be able to one-shot the Sprigatito or Florigato that you're building the active. So think about that and instead stack 1 in the back, because it's only 2 energy for the attack. If you need to, you can sacrifice your Weedle as your second point and then end the game with Meowscarada. The Weavile Darkrai matchup is even easier. You can see in tournament, we have a 77% win rate into it, and in ranked, it's probably even higher, to be honest. This is because Meowscarada can one-shot both Weavile and Darkrai without red, and then if they have a cape, you can also kill them with red. Weavile Darkrai doesn't deal enough damage to one-shot our Meowscarada, so if we get 1 Meowscarada out, we basically win the game. If you're running my version with a Pokecom as well, it's pretty unlikely that you don't find one single Meowscarada. You can completely ignore the Beedrill line, use it as tanks and meat shields until you get that Meowscarada off, and then it's GG's. I feel as if this deck has winning matchups into almost everything. The exceptions are going to be decks that don't run EXs, so Magnezone, as you can see, Darkrai Magnezone is a little lower, Rampardos is a little lower as well. The rare Dragonite is also really bad for us. This is because our Meowscarada attack, of course, doesn't do anything. It only deals 60 instead of 130. And we also have 2 dead cards in red because they only work against EX Pokemon. So you have to be pretty lucky to win those matchups. There are definitely things you can do to play around these matchups that I'll show off in the replay section. I have a really cool matchup against Rampardos where the odds are pretty stacked against us, but with clever play, I end up getting the win. Talking about the Rampardos matchup a little more, they also have a useless card in Sudowoodo against us that they usually run. Sudowoodo gets one-shot by Meowscarada because of the type advantage, and it only deals 20 or 40 with Lucario against our Meowscarada since it's not an EX. So they open with Sudowoodo. That's a pretty clear flag for you to be able to build up your deck by spamming Sprigatitos. Since it costs 2 energy for them to retreat, and they don't usually run X speeds, they can retreat until their 3rd energy and put into something else, so that's good for us. The big problem with that matchup is the Rampardos has 130 damage, and with 1 Lucario that one-shots Meowscarada, with 2 Lucarios or a red that one-shots your Beedrill. The thing is though, that's also a stage 2 competing with you though, so if they get that off, you're pretty screwed, but there's gonna be a lot of games where they don't get that off, especially since they have to play around a Fossil, whereas we have the searches plus Arcom plus Pokeball. But a lot of time against this deck, gonna be our same gameplay cycle, just swing with Meowscarada as much as possible. Giratina Mewtwo, this deck got popularized because it's able to one-shot the Manaphy through a Dawn play with the Mewtwo 2-cost attack. This matchup is better for us than the Druddigon matchup because we can also one-shot Mewtwo with red. Also, if they're swinging with Mewtwo, it's pretty common that we'll be able to just spam with the Sprigatito before we evolve into Meowscarada. And then same thing applies, we just need 1 Meowscarada on the bench to win the game here. So this is even better because we can tank the 50 damage from their Dawn play. Of course, we can't tank the 150 with anything that's not Beedrill if they use the Dawn for their 4-cost attack, but then they have -2 energy, and that's going to set them really far behind, where we have a Meowscarada on the bench, we're just going to be able to one-shot them on that 2 energy attack as well. So we're going to be ahead in both the late game and the early game, which makes this a pretty hard winning matchup for us. Gyarados Manaphy, you can see here in tournaments, it's got a 33% win rate. I think it should be a little bit higher, but not that much. The reason why this matchup is pretty bad for us is the Palkia Origin. So Palkia Origin, if they hit it, we don't deal bonus damage to Palkia Origin with Meowscarada. That's a big reason why they run it instead of Palkia EX. It's going to take us at least 2 attacks to kill with Meowscarada, maybe more if they have an Arita or a Cape on it. They also have free reign to stack with Manaphy. And then on top of all that, their Gyarados is 180 HP, which is really hard for us to kill. You can do it obviously with 2 Meowscarada attacks or 2 Beedrill attacks plus a red, but they also have the Arita healing to deal with that. It's just the fact that Gyarados can one-shot almost all of our Pokemon except Beedrill, and it's also tanky enough to tank 2 hits from everything. Plus they can play around 2 Manaphy's or Manaphy and Palkia as meat shields, and we only run 1 Sabrina. The Sabrina is going to be super helpful in this matchup, but other decks are going to do much better against Gyarados Manaphy if they're able to kill that Magikarp or Manaphy really fast, whether it's through Dawn Plates or Hitmonlee. We don't have access to that, so Gyarados is our losing matchup. You're sacrificing the chance of getting that matchup in exchange for all the Giratina, Mewtwo, Darkrai, and Weavile players. Gallade, Hitmonlee, they're going to be playing this to counter the Gyarados deck. I think this is a pretty winning matchup. You just have to be careful about not adding extra energy to your Sprigatito or your Meowscarada, because then Gallade will punish you for that. Gallade cannot one-shot you on 2 grass energy on Meowscarada or on Beedrill. It's going to deal a max of 110 for you if you only keep those 2 energy on, which is all you need, since it's 70 plus 20 plus 20. The rest of the deck is going to be stuff like Marshadow and Hitmonlee. Those 2 aren't really a big deal for us. You know, Hitmonlee can kill your Weedle in the back. A lot of games you can just build 1 Meowscarada in the active in this matchup, and then their Hitmonlee is completely useless, right? If you build nothing in the backline. Once they swap into Gallade, you can start building your stuff in the back as late game insurance. Or if you have Erika's, or you know like something's going to evolve fast enough to survive Hitmonlee, because if you evolve your Sprigatito into Floragato, they need 3 Hitmonlee attacks, not 2, to kill that off. Same thing applies with Kakuna into Beedrill. So the Hitmonlee is pretty useless. The Marshadow is a bit annoying, but it's not going to one-shot you either on both cases, so that's not a big deal either. It is a little annoying to have to kill through 2 non-EXs, but it is what it is. Once they get to Gallade, you can't one-shot it, but you can 2-shot it pretty easily. So I think it's a pretty good winning matchup for us. I feel like it should be around 60 as well. Weavile Darkrai, again, we absolutely own this deck, one-shot everything. Darkrai EX, Arceus EX. This deck is the meta deck of old. The time has passed now, old man. This deck loses to like pretty much every meta deck now. And the same thing goes for Meowscarada. You can one-shot Dialga and Arceus with the red. And they also have to scale for 2 turns, so by the time they get their Arceus in, you can use one of your Pokemon as bait and then swing with Meowscarada from the bench to end the game there. Once their Arceus drops, their Dialga doesn't really do enough damage to one-shot any of our Pokemon, so we're good on that. Their Arceus can't even one-shot Meowscarada without a Giovanni or a Helmet as well. Their Mew EX is also useless against us. If they run it, it can get one-shot by Meowscarada off the rip, and the bonus damage doesn't apply to Meowscarada. So yeah, I think this is a super hard winning matchup. I think it's just low sample size. It should be at 70% as well. Charizard EX Moltres. So this is the old Charizard, the one where you charge it with Moltres. This is a losing matchup. It should be a little lower, but not too bad because you can one-shot Moltres with red plus Meowscarada if you draw onto it. That's going to be where most of your wins are coming from. Just being able to overwhelm them super fast, or getting a Sabrina onto the Charmeleon and killing it off before it can attack you. Beedrill is also really nice in this matchup because Charizard EX discards 2 of its own energy, so if they don't have a Sabrina, you can get them to burn through 2 of your Meowscaradas, and then by the time they have that, their Charizard is going to be depleted. You can lock it out of being able to use that 4-cost attack anymore if they have only 3 energy. You can play Beedrill, attack with it, it goes down to 2, then they can never get to 4. They have no more energy generation unless they switch to another Moltres. So it's actually not that bad. What makes it decently bad is when the players realize that all of our basics and stage 1s can get one-shot by Moltres' 3-cost attack. The 3-cost attack deals 70 damage, and that goes up to 90 with the weakness to fire. That one-shots all of our Pokemon except our final stages. So what they can do is instead of investing into Charizard, or if they just don't draw it, they can just play the other Moltres, and they should just stack it. And then next turn, they have enough energy. They'll have the turn energy. If they get lucky with the 3 flips onto Moltres, they can just swap into Moltres. Or do that in another turn when they have enough energy. And then they can one-shot our stage 1 before we're even able to get to Meowscarada. So in that case, that's where you want to build a second Meowscarada if you can on the bench. Use more Sprigatito draws for that. Of course, once Charizard comes out, we can't one-shot it, but if you guys are equally lucky, you're probably going to be able to find the Beedrill. At that point, you're kind of relying on them not having a Sabrina, because once they have Sabrina, they can just one-shot the Beedrill and end the game off that, since that costs 2 life points. Meowscarada Mirror, so this is going to be either Beedrill or Meowscarada. I think in the mirror matchups, you can greed for Beedrill EX. Beedrill EX with all of its help is going to be your final closer to help you get those crucial kills. I think we have a really good matchup into the Executor decks. This is because you can 2-shot Executor with Meowscarada, and then Executor on average luck they're only going to be able to do 120 damage to Meowscarada. Of course, if they flip 2 heads in a row, that's going to 2-shot Meowscarada, but oftentimes they're going to 2 or 3-shot you, and then if you have Erica, that's going to delay you another turn. This is going to give you enough time to build out 2 Meowscaradas plus your Beedrill, and you can win the game over there. Darkrai Magnezone is a little bit of a tougher matchup because we have to get through that Magnezone. Magnezone can't 1-shot Meowscarada or Beedrill, but it can 2-shot it, and it doesn't take bonus damage from the Meowscarada attack. A lot of time they'll be hiding behind a Druddigon, so with that chip from Druddigon plus the Darkrai chip plus Magnezone's attack, that's going to be able to 1-shot us there. With this one, the hope is that you get your Meowscarada out fast and start beating through the Druddigon, and you find a Sabrina to be able to 1-shot the Darkrai in the late game by just swapping in your second Meowscarada. Palkia Wugtrio, so this one's also a little bit rough because we don't have a fast way to 1-shot the Manaphy. The saving grace is that we can 1-shot both Wugtrio and Palkia EX with a red, but the high pace, the fact that they have Manaphy, and the Dawn plays makes it a bit rough for us to be able to get to Meowscarada. A lot of times you might be relying on good hand draw luck to just hard natural the Meowscarada or get it with your first Sprigatito, and hopefully get through their Wugtrio as fast as possible. Sabrina is also going to help with this matchup, forcing them to not be able to generate anymore or swap back in. Articuno 18 Trainer, I think this deck destroys that deck. The Erica is enough to heal away all of the Articuno poke from the 2 damage. Of course, if they get a really lucky Misty, they're going to have a much better time against you, but you still can just 1-shot the Articuno anytime with Meowscarada plus red if they don't have a cape. And any extra poke damage, plus you can run through 2 of those Meowscaradas by the time they get their Blizzards up rolling. I think this matchup is super hard winning. You know, they have Arita, they have potions, but they don't have enough to heal away 2 130s from Meowscarada, so pretty easy matchup for us. Palkia 18, same thing applies. If they get lucky with a Misty, they can 1-shot us, but we have 2 points to play around with 2 Meowscaradas and then Beedrill, so I think it's also a pretty hard winning matchup for us. Pikachu EX, the new one gets played with Magnezone to generate for it and the Pachirisu. So same thing with the Gyarados thing is where we can't kill Pachirisu pretty easily or pretty fast like other decks can. But the difference is you can 1-shot Pikachu EX at any time with Meowscarada. You don't even need a red unless they have a cape. That makes this matchup a lot more tolerable. There's also no Druddigon to have to play around for the Magnezone, so Sabrina's going to help with this if you draw it. Otherwise, just play it through your first Meowscarada, then maybe swap into Kakuna to sack 1 more point, or Beedrill to swing, and then swap into Meowscarada for the game. But yeah, that's mostly all the matchups you'll see in Ranked. Obviously, there's going to be a few random decks, but most of the decks are going to be that Gyarados, Manaphy, Giratina Darkrai, Giratina Mewtwo, and the Weavile Darkrai, as well as mirror matchups. Out of those most common decks, we really only have a tough time into Gyarados Manaphy, so I think this is a great deck to play against in Ranked, especially if you think you're going to be playing against a ton of Giratina Darkrai players, which is really common in Master Ball and Ultra Ball. It also leads to much faster games than, say, like a Giratina Darkrai mirror, because you can 1-shot someone and their game's going to end. I think Weavile Darkrai is also a bit more popular in Ultra and Master Ball, so this is a great deck to pick. Alright, starting off with our first replay of the day, this is our Meowscarada deck versus Mewtwo and Giratina. So they went first, and they opened with Mewtwo in the active and Giratina passing with the ability to generate 1 energy. Basically, they need 2 more turns of generating plus attaching to be able to attack with Giratina. We opened with Sprigatito as going second, which means we can use Cry for Help on our first energy. And we draw really luckily into this matchup, right? Being able to find that Florgato into Meowscarada immediately means we can just stack straight into it. And we're going to be able to 1-shot Mewtwo and Giratina, both with the reds. So here, they're going to cape, so that means we can't 1-shot with red anymore, but we can just poke next turn with the Florgato to clear that out. They're going to attach 1 and then bellow the other. The main advantage of playing this Giratina variant with Mewtwo is that they can attack with the Psychic Sphere if they Dawn over an energy from Mewtwo on their first energy, or if they go first, right? Because then they have 1 energy in the back and 0 attached if they're going first. The next turn, you normally only have 1 energy attached, meaning they can attack, but since they have 1 in the back from the Giratina last turn, they can Dawn it over and attack on their first energy, which should normally not happen. In our case, though, it doesn't matter because we have the cape, and then I use the cape because if they have a Giovanni, in this case, it doesn't matter because we have cape and the Meowscarada, in this case, it doesn't matter because we have cape and the Sprigatito is already 60 health, which would survive the 50. They can't Giovanni and Dawn in the same turn, but I end up using the cape anyway because they could Iono it, they could red card it away. This turn, I can just red because I know I'm not going to need both to kill another Giratina. So I just use it, hopefully trying to get them to like waste heals here, because if they do, or if they do overheal, where I need to use another red. I have that in my hand. They're gonna take a while, and then they're just gonna pass and use an ability to charge Giratina. I simply just evolve into Meowscarada, and then attack with Fighting Claws, and that's gonna deal 130. Fully one-shotting that Mewtwo from its past health from the poke. And then they're gonna swap in Giratina, which right now is going to be able to get one-shot by me with a red. And the thing with Giratina, right, is if it attacks you, it's gonna take 20 damage to itself, and then that's gonna put it in one-shot range anyway. They do Giant Cape, which means you can't one-shot, but if they attack, they're still in one-shot range with the red, which is exactly what's going to happen right after this. And then that is going to be GG's right there. But yeah, I think in general, this is a pretty hard-winning matchup for us. We can one-shot the Mewtwo and Giratina if they don't have a cape with red almost at any time. And then once the Giratina attacks, they're also in that range. Our next replay here is against the infamous Druddigon, Darkrai, and Giratina. Basically, what happened here before this is that we opened with Weedle, and then we used it to poke onto the Druddigon. Weedle evolved into Kakuna, and then evolved into Beedrill, where we have the Florgato and Meowscarada on the back line. This is because we were able to use multiple Ericas to heal away our Pokemon while we drew a bunch of Pokemon off of the Sprigatito ability. And so we're at this point where we can just attack with Beedrill at 170 health. And they didn't find their Giratina, so they're dropping the Druddigon from their Darkrai and Giratina lists, as I mentioned in my last TikTok reel or short, because it's just a lot more consistent, because you really want Darkrai and Giratina on your first turn. So we can just poke through with the Beedrill, but you could also just do this with Meowscarada and Florgato, with the 40 plus 60 adding up to 100. Like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Oh my... Alright, we fixed it. Anyway. So they actually find their Giratina finally, and then they just poke with Darkrai. They can't do anything to our Beedrill right now until it hits that 90 HP mark, which then they can swap in the Darkrai and then kill it. But we have a cape now, so we can just play that. Attached to Meowscarada in the back. Notice how I split my energy in the back. I don't immediately like put 2 on 1. I just swap it between 1 and 1 on both, and then split it that way. That's because if you get Sabrina'd, you want to be able to have that excess energy to either use a move or retreat. And then next turn, you can simply just add the other energy. This is because all of our attacks across the board only cost 2 energy. So between Beedrill, Florgato, and Meowscarada, or anyone you have, all 3 of those basics that are evolved, except for Kakuna, they all have a 1 retreat. So you can just place 1 energy on each of them. And then next turn, you can just play however you like. This is susceptible to stuff like Team Rocket Grunt or a Beedrill though, so watch out for that. So I just cape, so I get another turn off of the Druddigon Reflect. So basically they have to leave, and then they can one-shot me with the Darkrai, but at that point I have a Meowscarada loaded, so it's just GG's. Yeah, basically the gist of this matchup is to just have this Meowscarada in the backline. It's way too powerful, being able to just one-shot the Darkrai, and then as the game goes on, they're going to stall pretty long, so it's pretty likely that you'll find a red, even if they have a Giant Cape. You can use Beedrill to break through the Druddigon, you can use Florgato to do it, and Meowscarada. Plenty of options there. Here's another replay against the Druddigon, and again, this is one where they don't find Giratina in turn 1, which is another reason why I don't run it, but I also am in a bit of a predicament as well because they Sabrina me into Weedle, and that's one reason why you don't always want to put down all their basics, because this applies more to like the Manaphy and Magikarp deck, because here we can just poke with Weedle, or like we're not feeling terrible here because we have so many evolves in our hand, right? But otherwise we would totally want to retreat out Weedle into Sprigatito and use that ability again. We might end up doing that anyway, but that's another reason to be careful about placing down stuff in the backline, as well as just him only if they have access to that. That can basically force you to lose a turn of energy, which can be really beneficial for them, but it also means they can't use a Sabrina later. Let's see what we do here against Druddigon. We have the entire Beedrill line in our hand again, which is pretty lucky. I'm going to use String Shot here just to poke down the Druddigon so I can kill it with Beedrill next turn. 20 plus 80 is going to be 100. Also, if it gets paralyzed, they can't retreat it. which is nice. But from here on out, I mean, we have Beedrill next turn. Kakuna can't die. And we can even just Erica the Kakuna as well. Once we evolve to Beedrill. We're gonna one-shot the Dredagon here. And then, you know, once you have the Meowscarada out, right, you're totally fine with sacrificing Beedrill to either Giratina or Darkrai. It's all good, because you can just one-shot the Meowscarada. A lot of times, though, you don't have that luxury. You'll be playing into Giratina Open plus Darkrai if they're pretty lucky. So at that point, you may want to just build into Kakuna instead, and then stop there, because if you build a Beedrill, right, and it dies, and you have two other Meowscaradas, you can only play one of them, because if one of them dies, you lose the game. So a lot of times it's going to be smarter to just leave it at Kakuna, even if you have the evolution available, if you can't one-shot a Darkrai or a Giratina, because a lot of times the Meowscarada, the second Meowscarada could have instead, so it's better to play those two instead, and then use Kakuna as another meat shield to get that energy and those evolutions up. So here, I'm just going to swap into Meowscarada and finish the one-shot, and that's GG's. Here's a really fast example of a matchup against the Darkrai plus Giratina plus Arceus. So they open with Darkrai directly. We have Sprigatito. We have two Pokeballs and a Professor. So we always want to use Pokeballs first and then Professor, because we only have two basics in our deck. So those two Pokeballs will eat up the rest of the two basics, and then we can't draw them anymore with Professor. If we were to draw with Professor first, then the two Pokeballs, and then we draw any of the basics, then the two Pokeballs are dead. They are useless cards, so better for us to cycle out all of our cards as much as possible, and then draw for key supporters and evolution pieces there. Alright, we're against Darkrai, so we really want to see the Meowscarada line from the evolution. We do draw into Floragato, which is very nice, and then here I feel safe playing both of the two, because I'm first, right? So I don't even have an energy attached. So if they Sabrina, I'm just going to put in the other Sprigatito and then use it next turn, or just evolve. So they open with Darkrai only, and this could be any deck at this point, right? Could be Weavile, could be Dredagon, could be Magnezone even. But I end up playing Sprigatito, Cry for Help, on the one that's already damaged. So at this point, right, they don't have anything on the bench, so they can't make us they can't do a Dom play on us. They'd have to, like, if they're playing Weavile, maybe they could Leaf into a Sneasel and then kill us if they flip two heads, but that's so unlikely. I feel pretty safe just using the Sprigatito ability. I'm trying to get a Meowscarada. They Pokeball into Arceus, which is a new variant that people are running. Focus with the Darkrai ability, and then here we draw into an Erica, which is very nice, because that's going to heal away those two turns of poke. We flip Tails onto the Darkrai, and honestly here I switch into the Beedrill because I have one energy on Beedrill, and then I have Beedrill tank the Darkrai. Obviously they could Cyrus into our Floragato and kill it off, but we still have the other Floragato in the backline. Is this play correct? You can definitely argue that I could also just search again to try to get Meowscarada on the other one and then attach to Meowscarada instead. But we already have the Beedrill line, and I think the Beedrill line is pretty powerful here, since we basically force them to attach onto that Darkrai every turn. And so they have their Arceus becomes pretty useless. They can't stack it up in the back. Slowing down their scaling there is pretty crucial to me, especially when I already have a red, which means I'm probably going to kill the Darkrai in 2 turns with Beedrill anyway. And I have the Erica as well, so I can just heal it next turn. I know I'm not going to be able to get one shot by 120 using that math. They're going to deal a max unless they have a red, which is something I should have calculated for, to be honest, because that's very common. Luckily for us, I believe they don't have it, but honestly, like, if they did have it, we'd be in a pretty rough spot. So I think the correct play here was actually to just stick with the Sprigatito and then charge one more time, and then instead go on to evolve the Floragato into the other guy, the Meowscarada. Fortunately for us, I mean, we saw their hand size was pretty small as well. They don't have that red that they needed. We draw into another Erica, which is pretty lucky. Unfortunately, we don't draw into the other Meowscarada, so we just keep pushing with Beedrill. and then they concede after that. Could they have won from the spot? No, they just don't have enough energy because of that Beedrill suck out. So, you know, that stall is really good for us. They can deal a max of 20 damage for the next 2 turns with Darkrai, and then 100 the turn after that. We can just kill whoever we want after that. And then once we find Meowscarada, we can literally one-shot all 3 of their Pokemon with red. So there's arguments for both plays. Honestly, the Meowscarada play, or the Sprigatito play is actually safer. And then in that case, you do what I said before. You wouldn't evolve into Beedrill, because if you do, and then you tank once, they can Cyrus next turn and then end the game there, because you're at 1 life already. Because Beedrill is going to cost 2 lives, so then you'll be out. But if you only stay with Kakuna and have it tank for 1 hit, you can then just Meowscarada next turn, kill that off, and then that's 3 of their energy depleted. They would have probably 1 or 2 all left on Darkrai, and then maybe they can attack you with that. But after that, you can just red whoever and kill them. And that's another reason why people are running Arceus, because after they stack up the Darkrai, they just start stacking Arceus. And that just gives you another option to deal 130 damage, just like Giratina does, without damaging itself. Here's a replay of a game I played on stream against the classic Manaphy, Palkia, and Oakhorn Palkia, I believe. So we open with Sprigatito, they open with Palkia EX. Already good for us, they don't open with the Manaphy. And we're first, we research, we have a Kakuna in hand and 2 Ericas. We find that Floragato, which is very nice. So at this point we have 6 in our hand, hoping we don't get hit with the red card or the Mars. This deck is really susceptible to that, just because of how many Pokemon we draw with Sprigatito. They missed their Misty, good for us. They attach, and then they're going to be able to swing for 30. So we have to evolve into Floragato next turn to live, basically. So here I have the choice to either evolve or get a Sprigatito charge off, but I already have the entire Beedrill line in my hand. So I'm just going to play the Floragato to make sure it lives. I'm going to save the Erica because next turn I can Erica for more value. Some games you're not going to be able to save it because you'll get in one-shot range because of it. But here I'm fine with saving it. I even draw into the cape as well. I'm going to evolve into the Kakuna. So there's an argument where you retreat Floragato and then just go into Kakuna, and hopefully you hit the Paralyze, which is going to stop them from dealing 30 damage. But then if you miss it, you're susceptible to getting hit with a Misty. And then if they Misty you, they can get that Dimensional Storm off, which is going to one-shot your Kakuna. And then your Beedrill in your hand is completely useless. So this is a bit of a safer play. And we're fine with taking it. We have an Erica in our hand as well. I think this is a Manaphy? Is it a Manaphy or an 18 trainer Palkia? We found our other Sprigatito. And then just play the Beedrill. We don't have finding Meowscarada, so at this point I only have 1 energy on Beedrill, so I can't retreat into it and attack with it. So I'm gonna red here and then swing with the Floragato so I can one-shot it next turn with the Beedrill unless they use any heal potion. Irida would heal them from that. So they end up finding their Manaphy, and then from here, they helmet the Manaphy, and then use Oceanic Gift to start stacking up the other Palkias. I finally found the Meowscarada, and then Meowscarada can one-shot Manaphy from 50, so I end up just doing it, I believe, because I have the Beedrill. I think it's a pretty safe play from here, because they have to either use Dimensional Storm or attack 3 times with the Palkia, and then I have the Beedrill in the back to finish the job. Since they only have 5 energy spread throughout, they put the other Palkia in to try to poke it out, because they're not going to be able to get off 2 Dimensional Storms unless they get really lucky with another Misty. And lucky for us, they flip Tails. If they got 2 heads here, they probably would have won this game. I think I still win here though, because I have the Erica, and then the Beedrill can also just remove energy from the Palkia. and then they concede. SGG's. I think this is a pretty winning matchup for us. You can just beat into the Manaphy. But the Gyarados matchup is a lot rougher because they have access to that Sacrificial Shield. If they're just running Manaphy plus Vaporeon plus Palkia, usually they're just going to want to swing with the Palkia immediately. Whereas if they're running the Palkia Origin, it's pretty often that they're going to swing that first. So decks with that have that second option are going to be a lot stronger against us because we can't one-shot them with Meowscarada. Whereas these decks, which are just focused on Palkia, are pretty easy for us to do. Alright, here is like a 15-minute long banger where we're playing with Sprigatito open against a Magikarp player. So we get lucky just right off the bat by just going second, right? That gives me a pretty big advantage against this Gyarados deck where we have a pretty big losing matchup to them. They open with Manaphy, Pokeball, and then they find a Magikarp, and then Misty the Magikarp. So here they could have also tried to Misty the Manaphy, but if you only have one Pokemon on your bench, just Misty the Magikarp, because if you put more than one heads, you're going to regret Mistying that Manaphy. But if you only hit one heads and you have two on the bench, you know, then if you get that energy on the Manaphy, you can actually use it on your first turn, letting you charge two Pokemon at once. So that's only a 50% chance, right, to hit that. But if you only have one Pokemon on the bench, then just put it on the Magikarp. Overflow protection. So we draw our second research, which can be good, can be bad. We draw into, oh my goodness. We draw into, so we open with two research and two Florigatos and one Kakuna, which means we have nothing if they Misty again, find Gyarados, swap in, we're getting a one shot, right? So that's always a possibility. We research into Weedle, and we're going to place that down because of that possibility. We are going to lose tempo if they Sabrina us, but that's also them wasting a Sabrina. I think it's fine to play this Weedle here. And we cry for help into the Beedrill, which is pretty lucky for us. I mean, we already have two Florigatos, so I think it's best here to either draw into the Meowscarada or the Beedrill. And we already have the Weedle out as well. So basically the only things we can draw here from the cry for help are either one Sprigatito, two Meowscaradas, and one Beedrill. So odds of us getting Beedrill are not that low, 25% chance. And if not, there's a 50% chance for us to get the Meowscarada, which is also good for us. They play the helmet, which almost all of these Gyarados players play the helmet as well. I personally play the helmet and instead of cape, which means we can one-shot it with one of the Meowscarada attacks. But by the time we get Meowscarada out, they might just retreat into Gyarados instead. So we use the second research. Unfortunately, Pokeball is dead because we already have the two basics out there. But there's reasons to use the Pokeball here, and there's reasons not to. I think neither applies to the Magikarp, but reason to keep it is if a deck is running Iono, most of the time it's going to be Charizard that runs it. Then even though Pokeball is a dead card, it's good to keep in your hand, because if they shuffle it away, that's one more chance to get something better than a Pokeball into your hand. Now, more commonly though, is you want to use it because if they see your hand is over 3, that makes it a prime target for a red card or a Mars, and you really don't want to shuffle it back in and then draw the same Pokeball again when you have -2 cards there. So always a decision. I think it's way more likely for their deck to have a red card or Mars than Iono, although I saw a subreddit post saying to play Iono in Gyarados. I really don't agree with that. I decide whether or not to use the Calm on the Florigato, but it's not like if I use the Calm, it's not like I can evolve into Meowscarada anyway. That's why I hold it in my hand, just in case I need to calm it away next turn. But in case of like Iono, this gives me a bit of a boundary or a bit of insurance to find that Beedrill EX again. They charge one more time because they can, and they probably have 2 Gyarados in their hand. I find my evolution at Beedrill. Unfortunately, I can't attack with it yet, and I don't find the Meowscarada. But that's fine because this turn, I believe I'm just going to swing into the Manaphy and sacrifice the Florigato if they have that Gyarados. And then another reason why this game is playable for us is because they don't find the origin form early enough to charge it. Otherwise, they would just swap into the origin form here, which would be not fun for us, because that origin form would be able to one-shot Floragato regardless of whether it was a heads or a tails. They end up helmeting a Magikarp and then moving it back with the leap out, and they play another Manaphy. So we draw into the Meowscarada, which is nice, but we could have one-shot it with Beedrill anyway. This one doesn't have the helmet anymore, so we're safe to attack with both Meowscarada or Beedrill. I end up doing the play where I attach one energy to Floragato instead, in case I want to be able to use another Meowscarada. Here doesn't matter that much, but in other cases, definitely relevant. Looks like they find their Gyarados with this research. And they find both Gyarados. So they one-shot our Meowscarada there. It's debatable whether or not I should have put in Beedrill. So the pros of leaving in Meowscarada is that I can play the Floragato here, and that's actually the bigger reason why I split the energy, right? I can see whether or not I got Meowscarada. If I did, then I'm going to swing with Meowscarada, right? And because I split that energy, I can actually do that. If I put the energy on Beedrill itself, I would not have the option to do that. And then since the retreat cost is only 1, there's no punishment for me putting out Floragato here. Unfortunately, I don't draw into Meowscarada. That would have been nice. So I'm just going to retreat into the Beedrill. I can't get one shot here, even if they had a... Actually, I can get one shot here if they have a red. I'm going to risk it for the biscuit because the chance I draw Meowscarada is not amazing here. Because we already dropped Floragato, so the Pokemon communication is not going to help us at all. There are still 2 Meowscarada in the deck, so it's not terrible odds, but we can't rely on it at this point. Very fortunately for us, they do not have the red. They choose to Iridian instead to heal back up. We hard draw the Meowscarada. And then here, I end up swinging. And at this point, right, we're at a critical junction where we got really lucky. So we only really won this because we're lucky, to be honest. And they make a kind of critical mistake here as well. So they attach onto the other Gyarados because they want to retreat into a next turn. They want to retreat to the Gyarados next turn and then basically play around the 2 health bars since I don't have this arena. But we get really lucky with their Gyarados discarding its own energy, which means that their Gyarados goes down to 3 energy here. And then earlier when they attacked, it went from 5 to 4. So what they should have done is maybe they should just attach to the Gyarados again. Now their Gyarados is going to be down to 3 energy. Next turn, they... Basically what I'm saying is they have to... What am I saying here, actually? I don't even know. Anyway. I find the Meowscarada. And then here, I swing again. And then because of this, right? They only have... So critically, their Gyarados discards its own energy twice. And that's really, really good for us because we're at this junction where they have 3 energy on both Gyarados. And what that means is that since our Beedrill discards 1 energy from their Gyarados, right? They cannot retreat and attack in the same turn because they're going to have to attach a water energy onto the Gyarados because they'll be at 2 to get to 3. And then... only then can they retreat, and then they can only retreat into the Gyarados that only has 3 energy, so they can attack. So our Beedrill is totally safe here. And this is only possible because we got super lucky with their Gyarados discarding its own energy, and because Gyarados players don't run Leaf at all. Simply because Manaphy is a 1-cost retreat, and they're just better cards to run. Leaf would help you unbrick with like the Palkia Origin, but I don't think it's worth running in Gyarados compared to stuff like Double Reds or 1 red even. Doritas, Misties, like there's so many better spoilers. So at this point, they're lost. They switch into the other Gyarados, and as long as they don't have Sabrina or Cyrus here, you know what, the Meowscarada, even if it got one shot in any world, we still have a 1 life left, which we can swap the Beedrill with. But in this case, the same thing applies, right? We Crushing Spear them, and then they lose another energy, and now they're in a perpetual world where they can't attack unless they draw into their Misty, which is what they're waiting for. And the next turn, we can just one-shot with Meowscarada. They don't have the Misty, so that is going to be GG's from there. Draw the Grunt, flip Tails for fun, retreat into Meowscarada, and swing for game. But yeah, I'm showing this replay because it was cool, but there are so many other replays where we lose to the Gyarados deck, so this, don't get me wrong, is a pretty hard losing matchup. But just showcasing some different plays you can make, and really also the flexibility of being able to split the energy between Beedrill and Meowscarada there. That's a really important thing you should note in your own games as well. Here's another quick Beedrill showcase of a lock you can do against any Pokemon, especially Charizard here. So they already used 2 of their Charizard charges, basically, to kill off 2 of our Meowscaradas. And then ending the game with Beedrill here, we basically make it so they can't attack with Crimson Storm ever again. They find 2 Charizards, so you can see how late into the game this was. I wish I had the full replay, but unfortunately I don't. And then we're just going to spam attack with the Beedrill. They need 2 energy to retreat or a leaf. And here I'm just going to swing. I save the red. They miss on the Team Rocket Grunt there, and from this point they have to concede because they don't have a leaf anymore, and it's GG's there. So showcasing the power of Beedrill once again. Here's a replay against the Charizard deck where they only find Moltres. So this is our second turn. We found, looks like Sprigatito Research as well. We used Sprigatito's ability last turn, so we have the 2 Florigatos and a Kakuna in hand, as well as a Meowscarada. And you know what that means? Meowscarada is going to one-shot the Moltres with red since they don't have a giant cape. I'm going to swing with Florigato anyway, because since we're not in any danger, but important thing to note about this matchup, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that the Moltres can one-shot Florigato from 90 HP with that Heat Blast. They flip Tails 3 times. I'm starting to think all these replays are just lucky. You know, I swear these matchups are a lot closer than I might be painting them out to be both ways, but yeah, you just one-shot both the Moltres there. If they had to flip 2 heads there to win the game though. They flipped 0, unlucky for them, but that would still be, you know, 33% chance. That would still be like a lower chance than 50%, so GG's. Alright, Darkrai Weavile, and this was an Earth Days tourney. This is my favorite matchup by far for this deck because you just one-shot everyone. It's amazing. So we cry for help into Weedle, and then here I'm debating whether or not to just throw away the Weedle to recycle it in case I get red carded. And then I find another Florigato. I'm looking for the second Sprigatito or the Meowscarada there. So I find the other Florigato, evolve it here, and then basically from this point, right, they only have Sneasel up, and they have no Darkrai in the back. If they have no Weavile, I can one-shot Sneasel next turn with the Florigato Slash. Otherwise, I'm looking to find the Meowscarada as soon as I can. They find the Weavile, and then they deal 70 damage max to us here. They'd actually deal 80 if they had Giovanni, but... So that cape actually saved our life, by the way, since we didn't find any other backline. In hindsight, should I have calmed away that Weedle turn 1? Probably not. If I didn't have cape, then definitely not. Then you definitely want to put the Weedle down in case you... Otherwise, like, I would have just lost the game right there. But we get lucky, hard draw into the Meowscarada here. And then they have no way to one-shot us with the Darkrai at 50 HP. You know, they could leaf into a Weavile, and that's going to deal a max, or a Sneasel, that's going to deal a max of 40 damage. but that's not enough to one-shot Meowscarada. So they're just gonna Darkrai. At this point, we can just one-shot next turn with Meowscarada and it's GG. It's just so strong of a matchup for us. But there we got lucky. Let's see this next game. We open the Sprigatito and 2 Researches and 2 Ericas. I'm not complaining about that either. I personally like going second because you get to actually use Cry for Help. But if you hard draw into the Sprigatito line into Meowscarada, then you can one-shot on Energy 2, which is way better, but you have to be lucky enough to get that. I am lucky enough to draw into Florigato, but it's a pretty good chance here, since Kakuna and Weedle already have a pool. Or Cry for Help into Florigato. They have just a Sneasel, Research, find the Weavile, and then they can only hit us for 30 max. Unless they have like a Darkrai plus the Dawn play, which would actually one-shot the Sprigatito here, but they don't have it. Florigato and I hard draw to Meowscarada, just luck again, honestly, but I still have the Pokecom and another Research to play around. So like next turn, it's pretty likely that I would have found the Meowscarada anyway. I don't evolve into the Kakuna in case I want to palm it away next turn into finding the other Meowscarada line, because that's honestly pretty useful here. And so I make a mistake here, right? I totally forget that you can just attach the Darkrai and hit with Weavile for 70 for 90 total. So I lose my 2 energy Florigato, which is a lot of loss for us. So here is what we have the Weedle. I evolve into Kakuna directly. And then I look-y get punished for not evolving Kakuna last turn. Because then I could have just evolved into Beedrill and then killed off the Weavile there. But I didn't do it because there's also a chance I get Sabrina and I don't draw into Beedrill. And then I don't have that option of retreating into the Meowscarada anymore, because Kakuna has that 2-cost retreat instead of 1. So that was my thinking at the time of why I didn't do it, but I should have just realized that I can just get one-shot from that point. So this is the play all along. Crucially here, I use the Pokeball I just drew first from Research. And then I use the Calm because this basically guarantees that, well actually, we only have 2 other Pokemon in the deck left, right? We have 1 Meowscarada and 1 Beedrill, so I guess it's a better chance. But here, if I evolve into Beedrill and then Beedrill dies somehow, then I'm dead. So they Sabrina us, which would have actually doomed us last turn if they were smart enough to make that play. Or if they didn't one-shot us anyway, but they one-shot us anyway. So that Sabrina would have doomed us. Like, my line of thinking was correct, but I should have just remembered that, oh, I can just get one shot from 90. So I don't draw into Beedrill, but I have the Calm now. It's... was it a 50-50 chance? I think it was, right? Because we didn't have him yesterday. We get lucky enough. But also, we could have just flipped heads on the Weavile as well on our stun last turn. For the Kakuna attack, if we did that. That was also another 50-50 chance. We would have solved another turn with that. Because they can't clear that Paralyze. From here, they find another Weavile, so they're going to attack us with that. They should have just attacked with the Darkrai instead. They would have dealt 120 total. And the next turn, they could have killed us off. So it looks like another mistake from them. What is happening? I should be dead. But that's why, like, if they did that, I would have Team Rocket grunted. And then hoped I would live there. Hopefully you'd discard enough, but then at that point they can just leaf into the Weavile. And then they would have won this game, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's a mess everywhere, but here, if I had Sabrina, I'd just slip in. Here I get lucky with the grunts. So, another showcase of Beedrill. Discard 1 energy from Darkrai. Now they can't use the Darkrai Dark Prism, and from here on out, it is GG's. They switch into the other one, and now they have no energy to play around. Could they not just... They could have just killed me with freaking Weavile. If they had this other leaf the entire time, which maybe they just drew it there, but if they had that leaf, they could have just killed me with Weavile that turn. They must have not had it. Wait, what? Oh, no, okay, yeah. They attach, and then they retreat into the Weavile. They don't have a leaf. Okay, yeah. Into the Dark, yeah. But at any point, if they had a leaf, they could have one-shot me with the Weavile. But they don't have it, and then that's GG's from there. It's actually really close to tie, but yeah. That's that. Here's another replay where we actually kind of low roll, but they also don't open with Weavile. We open with Weedle, so this just shows 40 damage per turn on Weedle. Not bad at all. If they're weak to grass. So they trade pokes, and then we know, unless they have, like... they can, like, leaf into Sneasel next turn and then flip 2 heads. Otherwise, we're good. But once we evolve, we're in no danger of dying here. So we String Shot. Hopefully get the Paralyze so they can't retreat. And then if we get the Beedrill draw next turn, that's a lock. We're gonna take 20 damage from the Darkrai ability here. Pretty sure, unless they attach the other guy, which they're probably not going to. If we hard drew into Beedrill here, the game is just completely over. But we have Meowscarada anyway. We can just and here's the thing, right? We can just retreat into it next turn, but this turn we don't have enough because Kakuna's a 2 retreat. We also just hit a massive grunt on them, but it doesn't matter from here because we already found the Meowscarada on the back. So we're honestly just waiting for this Kakuna to die or for us to get enough energy to retreat it. I decide to use the cape because of that leaf play into Sneasel, which they end up doing. They find the Weavile, and they end up killing our Kakuna, which kind of sucks, but we have the red in hand. We can one-shot Weavile. And so that is just a red. GG's. And GG's there. So yeah, this matchup is pretty hard winning for us. You just need to find one Meowscarada most of the time, and then even if that, if you need it, you just play the other Meowscarada and win through there. So pretty easy matchup for us. Here's another against that Darkrai Arceus Giratina deck. So what happened there? Oh my goodness. Here's another replay against that Darkrai Arceus Giratina deck. I opened with Pokeball and Research, which is really nice. We already killed the other Pokeball, but we don't draw into it, thankfully. Now we have 2 Sprigatito, 1 Kakuna, and 1 Meowscarada in hand. So here, basically I calm because I'm afraid of getting hit with the, what's it called? The red card. I should have played the other Sprigatito here, because then if we have 3 cards in hand, we're probably not going to get red carded. That's my mistake. There's actually no reason not to play the other Sprigatito here. Unless you think you're going to get Io Node. So they get kind of unlucky here with their start. Only have an Arceus. We evolve into Florigato, evolve into Kakuna, and we got the Beedrill from the Calm. Pretty lucky for us. Kakuna String Shot misses the Paralyze, so they are able to retreat if they find the retreat. They have a Cape. They have a Darkrai. and then they are gonna use a leaf, and then they're gonna charge their Arceus instead of charging the Darkrai. Basically saying like, okay, you're gonna have the Darkrai, which is exactly what's gonna happen here. Crushing Spear. So if they did attach a Darkrai, right, they would have lost that energy immediately. So they would have dealt 20 damage to us, but they don't have that, or they would lose their turn of tempo there. So smarter play for them to back up the energy onto the Arceus if they know I have a Beedrill. They research, and then here they're gonna find the other Arceus. So now they start stacking damage on the Arceus because whenever the Darkrai falls, they can just attach to the Arceus. So they start stacking on the other Darkrai, sorry, because they can just retreat. Once this Darkrai falls, they'll just play the other Arceus, and then they can use their energy. So that extra 20 damage helps because if they have a full bench plus red, they can one-shot my Beedrill from 150. I swap into the Meowscarada. There's actually an argument where you put the Arceus energy, onto Arceus first instead, because then they'd be able to hit my Meowscarada and then one-shot it with the Arceus. So, pretty small, but impactful play there. If I have red, I can still one-shot the Arceus with Beedrill though. It's actually from here, right? They could have attached onto Darkrai, and then if they have two Pokemon on the bench, they can one-shot me with Arceus. So they leaf out into Giratina, and then they Nightmare Aura, and they run out of time. Decision Paralysis to use the Giratina ability, which sucks for them. But from here, we have a pretty hard-winning point now. They can still do the play where they one-shot our Meowscarada. They instead use Dawn as a leaf because they have to. If they got the ability off, they didn't have to Dawn, so that sucks for them. But from my point, you know, if I had a red, I would have one-shot the Arceus, so this is actually pretty close of a game, but they just made a few misplays. A few optimizations from their part could have saved their game here. So here's the game against Rampardos, which I played in a tournament. I ended up losing this match 1-2, but this is the one I won. I'm not showing it just because I won, but I thought this was a cool solution I had to this game. So I opened with Sprigatito. They opened with Marshadow open, which is a good sign for us because Marshadow can attack for the first turn. It needs 2 energy to do it. I think like the worst case is that they start with Riolu swinging, and then next turn they evolve into Lucario. That's going to one-shot our Sprigatito. If they have 2 Lucarios or Giovanni, that will also 2-piece the Floragato. So they find the Fossil and Riolu, which is really good for them as a start to get the ramp up. We cry for help. We have no one in the backline, so we are right. Like the thing I just described with the Riolu into Lucario, right? That is very scary for us. So if I didn't find my Floragato here, I'd be dead next turn. I already had it from the starting hand though, so. We're gonna attack into Marshadow. Next turn's gonna die if they don't move it. They're gonna calm. I'm gonna place the Sudowoodo. I really don't think you should ever play Sudowoodo against my deck here, because that's a slot for another Riolu or even another Cranidos into Rampardos, and then Sudowoodo gets owned by Meowscarada because it has 80 HP plus a weakness to grass. So that's a full one-shot there. So I think they make a slight error there. And from here, I'm basically seeing, can I get one shot by anything? If so, I need to Erica. If not, I can also research to kind of gamble and hopefully get something in the backline so I don't instantly lose a game if they have basically a one-shot me here, right? They need to have a Giovanni plus a Cranidos here, which these players, like Rampardos players, don't run Giovanni usually. I think some of them run red, but I don't think they ever run Giovanni. So I think it's really unlikely. that we get punished for this. So we end up doing the research play to hopefully be able to stack up either Weedle or another Meowscarada in the back line, because we have the entire line for both of them. Unfortunately, we find neither, so we're kind of sweating, but we do have the cape as well. That would protect us from that Giovanni play, which is helpful. So they've let a Sudowoodo as a tank. Yeah, I don't agree with playing Sudowoodo, but it is a meat shield for one turn. Like, honestly, I would just meat shield the Lucario. We find Pokeball on our hard draw, and then run a Sprigatito. Still no access to the Weedle line at this point. Yeah, I end up retreating because I can get one shot by the Cranidos next turn if I attack into the Sudowoodo. So I know that Sudowoodo takes 2 energy to retreat, and these guys never run X-Speed or Leaf. So they're going to need to attach again to Sudowoodo next turn, and then attach to Granados or whoever they want to use the turn after that to play around Sudowoodo. And Sudowoodo only deals 20 per turn to me, or 40 with the Lucario. So I know Sprigatito is not in danger of being one-shot because they can't play a Riolu and a Lucario on the same turn. Now they have a slot open to play the second Lucario if they want to. I use a Cry for Help to find my final Weedle, and now I have access to that Beedrill line, which means I can tank one Meowscarada, the other Meowscarada, and then play the Beedrill last, which is going to be pretty crucial in this matchup. So, yep, they attach the Sudowoodo again. Poke. I play the Weedle. I play the Florigato, sorry, to live here. And then I poke here for 60. Doesn't really do anything, but I'm basically signaling that I'm sacrificing this Florigato, unless they Sabrina or whatever it's called, Cyrus. We get Ionode, which kind of sucks for us, but we have a ton of things in our hand, and we just redraw our entire hand that we needed. So that's nice. We also have an Erica here, which is also pretty nice. We're just gonna evolve into the Kakuna. And then here, I'm totally good with Erica-ing Meowscarada. That means it can't get one shot by the Rampardos anymore. It was at 110, now it's at 160. And then I finish off that tree. And here, we only need 1 more point to win the game. They need 3. So they're gonna have to kill through our Florigato, plus our second Meowscarada, plus our Beedrill to win the game. From here, I just play Beedrill because I know they're not running an X-Speed or a Leaf. In tournaments, you get to see their deck list, but also in general, they probably aren't. And then I play a Grunt. It doesn't matter here because of the energy. I play Grunt. It doesn't matter here because of the energy. It's nice that it discards 2, but because of the energy loss, it doesn't matter because they can retreat and then attach to Rampardos because of the Beedrill lock. So from this point of the game, it is GG's. Even if I didn't hit that Grunt. But yeah, I mean, this matchup is generally losing because Meowscarada can't one-shot Rampardos, but it still does have a type advantage against a lot of its Pokemon. And then their Sudowoodo is useless against us as well, unless it's attacking your Beedrill, which it almost never will. Yeah, even if this goes to show how useful Beedrill can be, even if they have those one-cost attacks. Here's an example against a Gallade. I think this matchup is generally winning. For a few reasons, it's not like super hard winning, but Gallade can't one-shot us unless you attach too much energy to either Pokemon, so that helps a lot. And then the Hitmonlee isn't entirely useful. It can be useful for them, but you know, we have Ericas to heal it through. We can't get one shot like Magikarp can, so that helps us in this matchup as well. We open with Weedle. If we go back to the start, I think I opened with only Weedle. Yeah, and then I have the Pokeball. I'll open with Weedle and Sprigatito. So I have the choice here. I think low-key I didn't see I had Sprigatito in my hand, so I just put out Weedle on autopilot. That's what happened. Oh no, I was first and I drew into the Sprigatito. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Pokeball here, play both. I actually only play one because I have the Pokecom in hand, so if I hard drew into like the other cat, the grown-up cat Florigato, then maybe I calm away this Pikachudo and try to find Meowscarada as soon as possible. Or I just calm into Kakuna next turn, or I calm into Beedrill, hopefully next turn, and evolve into that line. I have no reason to use the calm right now, and so I decided to calm away the other Pikachudo instead of Meowscarada, because, you know, if we get the Florigato, we want to be able to evolve into Meowscarada next turn. Kakuna here, stall, hopefully flip the stun there, which I do, which is very nice. They can't teleport away anymore, but you can see that it gets cleansed by the evolve. They Ion us, and then we draw into our Florigatos finally. We saw them. So, not calming there actually would have gotten us more draws from Iono. So they swap into the Hitmonlee and kick us. But we have the Florigato, so we can just evolve it, and it'll be safe. Flip Tails, unfortunately. They're going to kick us again, probably. Oh, they Cyrus. And then they decide to kick the Kakuna instead, because they think we have Beedrill, and they want to get that over with in one-shot range. I find the Meowscarada, and then just swap it in, and then hit the Hitmonlee for 60. Fully healing that. They swap into Marshadow, and then they have the Revenge up, because the Hitmonlee dropped. So they can hit us for 100 max there. They helmet their Ralts that's not damaged. So I guess they're trying to fully evolve into Gallade there. We just swing. We know they can't one-shot us with anything here. Marshadow only deals 40, max of 50 with Giovanni. And then we're just stalling to get our other evolutions out. I don't know, did I just play? I just played that Spirited, right? Yeah. And then notice how I'm splitting my energy again, in case you get Sabrinaed. This is a good thing to always do. I attach onto Florigato because I see the Meowscarada in my hand. And then here they Cyrus. And then swap in. Because they're basically hoping I don't have anything. Which I don't have the Beedrill. I'm deciding whether or not to retreat or to swing. It looks like I do end up retreating, hoping to draw into, what's it called? And then I just sack the Meowscarada. Hoping to hard draw into Beedrill here. I get Mars, which I am up 2 points here, so that kind of sucks. But I draw into the Beedrill, which is nice. Unfortunately, it gets kicked anyways. Which kind of sucks because they played down to him on lead, but from here, I'm just going to poke him down. They find the Gallade, but it has no energy on it, and then at this point, Gallade is going to get one-shot by a Meowscarada because of the bonus damage, and I have 2 Meowscaradas on my hand, and since I didn't evolve into the Beedrill, I have 2 lives left, so that's going to be GG's. That's a wrap for today's video on Meowscarada Beedrill. Hope you enjoyed and hope you learned a bunch. I come up with daily deck lists on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikTok, as well as more in-depth guides on my YouTube channel right here, so make sure to follow on those platforms and drop a subscribe. Trying to stream as much as I can as well on all of those platforms, including right here on this YouTube channel, so drop a follow. If you're interested, make sure to join our Discord, link in the description. We got a trading channel and all of my deck lists are posted there, super easy to view. Got a tier list up there as well. Feel free to discuss anything with our community. Stay tuned for another guide on Gyarados EX coming soon, as well as a tier list for all decks in ranked. Once again, thanks for watching and climb on.